I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championship.
Something stupid is coming out of his mouth.
I don't know. Maybe it's just my age. He needs his vote pulled immediately. And of course, yes, a season like this has to have a name.
Let's talk about something good about Justin Freck. What are you doing?
Season of dreams. Ohio State, my guys, are either the best or the second best program in the history of college football.
This guy is a bonehead. They love him.
I question your judgment as an adult. I really do.
I was a total hater. I know that for a fact, and I just don't get it.
Get us back our sleeves.
And say, bring me that. That's the one I want. And welcome to Juckonbucks. Tomorrow is the day, guys. Notre Dame, Penn State, Marcus Freeman, James Franklin, the most obnoxious large fan base in the world versus the most non-existent large fan base in the world. I say that because al.com did that study that we've talked about a couple years ago, in which they found out and polled in a lot of different ways to figure out who had the largest fan bases in the country. Penn State, one of the largest alumni bases, and that study by al.com had them pegged as the third biggest fan base in the country. Penn State. The only thing is, I live right next door to Pennsylvania. I don't know any Penn State folks. I don't run into them online. I never run into them in person. I don't know them at all. I certainly know a lot of Notre Dame folks, and they are very obnoxious. But we're going to discuss that Penn State Notre Dame game, and of course, the Ohio State Texas game. And I had my buddy College Football with Sam come back on with me, and you guys seemed to enjoy him the first time. So Sam and I got together and talked about everything going on both tomorrow and Friday for the big game down in Dallas, which is the weather is becoming, I guess, a big issue, guys. The weather's a big issue. They're wondering if Buckeye fans are going to have a hard time getting there. We'll see, man. We're going to be outnumbered for sure. I checked the prices. They're a lot more expensive than the Rose Bowl, and I checked the national championship game prices today. My gosh, guys, we're talking $1,300 just to get in right now, which that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money just to get in. I've sat in the nosebleed seats at that place in Atlanta. Not great. I don't know if that's $1,300 well spent, but you know, I think we got to do it. I think we got to take the Juckonbucks trip down there. Before we get into our conversation with Sam, a little bit of portal news. Damon Wilson has entered the portal, and Damon Wilson is a guy that the Buckeyes finished second for in his recruitment to Georgia. That was in the class of 2023. He has 2 years of eligibility left. 6'4", 250 edge rusher. This past season, 22 tackles, 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and it would only make sense that the Buckeyes are going to get in on this one. And we saw some indications from that from 247 early that they were going to. Not only is there a good relationship already, but the Buckeyes have been talking about potentially changing some things up on the defensive line and the way they're playing next year. And I think this would be a huge get, a big time upgrade for the defense, and a perfect fit for what we think they're going to try to do next year. Well, it wasn't 16 hours before he entered that portal that we've now seen 2 crystal balls with intel from On3 for Damon to the Buckeyes. And when you see the intel, it generally means that they've heard something through back channels and discussions, and that's really promising. Now, this won't be cheap. He's going to be an expensive player. He's a stud. He was a 5-star. You know, this is an NFL dude. And I'm getting really pumped because this I think would be a really impactful get for next year's defense. We talked about the personnel for next year's defense. Adding him to it would be really nice. So really pumped about that. I'll keep you posted. Yesterday, we talked about the recruiting staff heading out on the trail for this new contact period that started January 6th. A couple of interesting offers went out. We saw a couple of offers go out to Chaminade Madonna, wide receivers. Chaminade Madonna, of course, Jeremiah Smith and Kenyatta Jackson's alma mater. Denarius Gray, 4-star, number 180 overall, 6'2", 178. He's an Auburn commit, a wide receiver out of Chaminade. Heartline offered him, but not only him, he also offered Jason Lopez. Jason Lopez is a wide receiver that is 5'10", 165 pounds, the number 460 player in the country, and he got an offer from Brian Hartline. If you're 5'10", 165, rated 460 in the country, and Brian Hartline offers you, guys, we got to see that film. This dude is going to be awesome. And we will watch that film, but we're going to wait till the postseason's over and there's no more football. I'm jotting down notes, things that we got to go back and check on. I bet it's fantastic. We're also going to watch 2027 wide receiver Julius Jones Jr., who Heartline also offered. This is a top 5 wide receiver in the class. Of course, we already have the number 1 wide receiver in the class of 2027, Jameer Brown, committed to the Buckeyes, and he will be a Buckeye whether Brian Hartline is there or not. He's got his new Buckeye tattoo down his arm. He's shut his recruitment down totally. He doesn't want to talk to anybody. Absolutely love Jameer Brown. This is going to be awesome. Couple more offers. Bryant Junius, another Chaminade Madonna guy, a linebacker, offensive tackle Ekene Agboki, and that is a very high-rated 4-star, the number 2 interior offensive lineman in the country per 24/7 at 6'6", 280, one of the top dogs out of North Carolina. North Carolina, an area that the Buckeyes have been winning in, and they're really starting to focus on, which I absolutely love. Ton of talent, not a huge state school, though Belichick is trying to change that. And it's not the deep South. Those guys are much easier to get to come a little bit north up to Ohio. So I love the renewed focus on North Carolina. The other day, I played a clip of a podcaster from Texas talking about Ryan Wingo, who is a freshman wide receiver on Texas. He's awesome, but he was talking about him being a better prospect than Jeremiah Smith. Now, that clip was from week 4. And I've been clowning him ever since. I played it several times because it's just total nonsense and it's just somebody being a homer. But I've got a lot of Texas folks popping in. So I do the same thing. Like the week we're playing somebody, I go pop in on their shows and see what they're saying. And Texas folks are coming up here and checking us out. And that's cool. Welcome to all the Texas folks. We come in peace. We just tell it like it is around here. And Ryan Wingo isn't Jeremiah Smith, but you guys already know that. There are a couple who are popping in and trying to defend his take by saying Ryan Wingo is sitting on the bench. That's why he's not putting up Jeremiah Smith numbers, which pretty much makes the entire argument that Ryan Wingo isn't Jeremiah Smith, because Jeremiah Smith isn't sitting on anybody's bench. At any rate, let's hear what the Texas DBs have to say about Jeremiah Smith. Michael Taffy, starting safety. Everything that he offers is just incredible. He looks NFL ready. Right now, he's going to get the ball over 3 defenders. Will Howard has just given him the chance, and clearly he's making his money. He's very talented. Asked if he's faced anyone like Jeremiah, he said, I don't think you can compare anybody to Jeremiah. The whole country knows what type of guy he is, the type of football player he is, and he's only getting better. So, no, I don't think you can compare him to anybody else. So there you have it. That's a guy that practices with Ryan Wingo every day, saying you can't compare anybody to Jeremiah Smith. Case closed. That's your guy. Barron and Makuba also had really nice things to say about him. Look, that Texas secondary is incredibly stout. Incredibly stout. And the Buckeyes wide receivers are going to have their best test of the year against these guys. I think Texas is going to do really well with them. I do. I don't think Ohio State is going to score a ton of points in this game. But I do think they're going to score more than Texas. I do want to ask you guys if you could please subscribe to the show. I'm really pushing for a goal here as we close in on 1 year at Juckonbucks. And all it does is make it easier for you to find our new videos. I don't clog up your feed with 5 different segments of my show that I pump out throughout the day like some people. So if you could please do that for me, I would really appreciate that. The show is also simulcast on Menace to Sports, as some of you know. I'm very good at answering the comments on Juckonbucks on the page over there. So if you want to leave a comment and that I respond to, leave it over in Juckonbucks. Look, for whatever reason, the tenor sometimes with the commenters over on Menace to Sports for whatever video just has a little bit more vitriol. There tend to be a little more angry people that want to come in on that side of things and leave us nasty comments. I don't know why that would be. I have no idea. But I generally stay away from my comments over there because a lot of times people come in just to be nasty. I don't know why that is. I'm a pretty friendly guy. But if you want me to respond, leave it over at Juckonbucks. Odds are I will. So please like the video. Please subscribe. And let's get into my conversation with my guest, Sam from College Football with Sam. He's excellent. Check him out. Here's our conversation. And joining us again at Juckonbucks, we got our buddy College Football with Sam. Sam, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing, Juck?
You know I'm floating on a cloud, buddy. So happy to have you back. Heading into that Rose Bowl, you had picked the Ducks by 1 score. I was talking earlier this week on the show, and I said, to me, that was a top 3 most shocking result I have ever had as an Ohio State fan. Fantastically shocking, but shocking nonetheless. What were your thoughts on that Rose Bowl before we move on to Texas?
It was surprising how just the juxtaposition between how it felt like Ohio State's staff took this game versus how Oregon's did. Part of the reason I picked Oregon, and it was foolish, but part of the reason I picked him was because I thought that Lanning and his staff would understand that they couldn't do the same thing over again because Ohio State's too good. That it didn't look like that happened at all. It looked like they wanted to do exactly what they did the first time around, which is poor coaching. Meanwhile, Ohio State was adaptive. They, I think, pulled out the kitchen sink and more and threw it right at Oregon. And just for Ohio State, all their players, all their coaches, Will Howard making perfect throws to whether it's Ibuka or Smith, and then Oregon being confused on defense. It was like all the controllables that Ohio State could control, they controlled, and that's very good. And then for Oregon just completely fell apart very quickly. So it was mainly due to what Ohio State did. It was a perfect snowstorm for them, and things just snowballed, and that's how you get to 34-0 is several punts forced by Jim Knowles' defense, which just was, phenomenal. They kept everything in front of them. They were disciplined in coverage. They got pressure, whether by coverage sacks or just straight up bullying Oregon's offensive line. And then Ohio State's offense was confusing Oregon's defense. We talked a little bit about it before we started here, using a lot of motion, getting Oregon's undisciplined defense off kilter, and then just being super aggressive and physical through the air attack.
A coaching masterclass, and all the best players on the team just had a great game. A really fun game to go out to. I made the trip, as you know, it was an amazing time. But you picking Oregon wasn't crazy. I mean, we saw the Michigan game, and then we saw one game after that where a lot of things changed. We didn't know if that was going to carry on into the Oregon game. We had no idea. Trying to predict this Ohio State team at this point is very difficult. They made a lot of changes, from running a ton of inside zone against Michigan and a lot of points during the year to going a lot of gap scheme, counter. They got the run game working, obviously, against Oregon. They were passing in more, not just passing obvious downs, a lot of different passing concepts that they had not been running. And I think one of the biggest things we're noticing against Tennessee and against Oregon is, even when it's not following the progression, we're seeing Will Howard make a conscientious effort to get the ball to Jeremiah Smith. Just sweeping changes. So we had no idea that following Tennessee, they were going to go into Oregon and do the same kind of thing. We just didn't know. But moreover, I thought that Oregon would also be ready for what we saw against Tennessee. They clearly weren't. As we look at Oregon, in that game, we talked before the game, had a lot riding on it in terms of the Big Ten moving forward in the future, the kind of the structure of power. It feels like Ohio State has reasserted the dominant position in the Big Ten, despite Oregon winning in its first year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I said it when Chris came on my show on Sunday. What Ohio State has done by winning the Rose Bowl is they aren't like far and away the number one program, just because, Oregon beat them the first time around, Penn State's still alive, and just the fact that Ohio State this year, for better or for worse, has 2 losses, but they're floating at the top. And that's the best position you can be in with how the regular season has transpired, I think, is right now you're floating at the top. Depending on how next year goes, maybe that changes, but you're entering 2025 as the number one program in the Big Ten with a lot of momentum and 2 dominant performances in a row that should give, I think, faith in Ryan Day as a game manager, at least in a postseason setting. He's 3-3, I believe. Yeah, 3-3 in playoff games, 4-2 against the spread, and he's only lost to 2 national champions and another being 2019 Clemson, who may have won the title if not for LSU existing. So I think he's definitely a coach that overachieves in the postseason and plays up to his ceiling.
Obviously, the period between, and I've talked about it with Chris the other day. I think we're kind of living in the weirdest period, my Ohio State fandom history from the Michigan game to now. Just the depths of despair to all the way up. And a lot of fans that I talk to every day, they were out, but they were saying he's got a chance to win me back. But right now, I'm out. And after the Tennessee game, it brought a ton of people back. After the Rose Bowl, I feel like everybody's like, all right, no matter what happens from here on out, I want this guy to stick around. I believe in him. He definitely has the goods. And I think we always knew he had the goods. But at the same time, when you look at that Michigan game, if Ohio State wins that game 21-14, do we see this, Sam? Do we see these changes?
I don't know. And the reason I say I don't know and not definitely know is we've seen this from day before, like in 2022, where that Michigan game could have been managed a lot better, I think. And then they went on against Georgia and they played a really good game and nearly beat the number one team in the country and would have won it all. We've seen it, I think, in the Rose Bowl game in 21, where the Michigan game, I think just Michigan that year had some matchup edges regardless, but that was a bad loss. And then they go out in the Rose Bowl, and after a rough first quarter, they're just on and on and on, and nothing's stopping them. So I'm not going to definitely say no, because I've come to the belief that it might just be in Day's nature to just be kind of a wizard in the postseason, or at least try his best and, jump out. But also, I think the Michigan game, to a certain degree, probably did serve as a bit of a wake up call in some areas, because just how bad of the loss it was, and yet at the same time, Ohio State still had a shot. Like, they lost the game, it's humiliating, but they're in the playoffs. They have a home game and a chance to right the wrongs of the regular season, which anyone, any team would take. I mean, Will Howard said it, you don't get second chances often in life. That's true. And that's true for about 122 college football teams who don't get to participate in the 12-team playoff.
That's right. I do think that you might be onto something. And if he can end up cashing this whole thing in, you're right, man. A wizard in the postseason. That's going to be the new reputation. When we look at his record, should that happen, and we look at the performances of the Ohio State teams that he has coached in the postseason, that's going to start to be the reputation, which I think is really cool. That game and Tennessee, we've had some really unbelievable performances from a lot of different groups on the Ohio State team. What group has impressed you the most compared to their regular season performance to the postseason performance on this Buckeye team?
That is really difficult, but thank you for clarifying regular season versus postseason, because overall I would say the safeties, but regular season to postseason I think would have to be the defensive line. I don't know if it's a scheme change or what, but even when they change schemes from pre-first Oregon, like that first matchup to post, the D line still wasn't getting a lot of pressure. That's why Knowles had to blitz a bunch with Simon and the linebackers to generate some pressure and help the D line. In the postseason, they haven't had to blitz as much, and I don't exactly know what happened, but the D line's getting pressure on its own, which is a really good sign moving forward.
It really is, and I agree with you. That's my answer to that as well. The offensive line has gotten it done, and credit to them. It's been an amazing thing to see with the injuries they've had. Not the only team left in the postseason with injuries. Notre Dame also lost their center and their left tackle. What's your take on the Buckeye offensive line? How good they're playing? They did change some of the scheme to help them out. They're getting it done, man, and it's a great thing to see.
They are getting it done. I think that's what matters. I think with everything around them, defensively and offensively, they just have to really do their job. That's kind of what they have to do. They don't have to be an elite unit. My takeaway, I definitely gave them their flowers. the O-line after the Oregon game, but my takeaway so far is that a lot of schematic changes are really helping them out. Same with Donovan Jackson being at left tackle. You know, the most experienced players, the best players are in the tackle position. And that naturally fits with the fact that Ohio State right now wants to be more of a lead with the pass type of team. I don't think that Justin Fry has redeemed himself. I need to see them win it all, or something even more than that, because I think that, for example, like with Notre Dame doesn't have any wide receivers that Ohio State does. They do not have Will Howard, who can be very elite passing the football. Riley Leonard is not that. And I mean, yeah, I keep pausing and stuttering on this because it is hard, and because there is a chance that I am wrong. But I think that the offensive line, with the supporting cast it has, with the skill position players and the scheme, and the defense, has one of the easier jobs for an offensive line in college football. And the fact that they're having to do all this motion, all this pulling from both sides of the O line, and they have to do it after they pass a bunch, just they're trying to do everything they can, and I think it's pretty clear, to help the offensive line out. And even with that, you know, on Pro Football Focus, they're still not getting fantastic grades. So I like how you put it. They're doing their job. I think that's what they need to do. I don't think they need to do anything more than that if this team continues to function at a high level. But I still think Ohio State after this year would benefit from a better O-line coach who can do a better job recruiting in high school and developing players. Because imagine this Ohio State team with a really good offensive line. They would be undefeated, even with the Michigan game plan, even with some of the stuff that happened against Oregon. They'd be undefeated. They'd be unstoppable offensively. Nothing could stop that unit. So always look to, I'd say, ride the momentum, improve, upgrade. That's the standard at Ohio State. They're a blue blood, and that's why I hold that opinion.
When we look at this Texas team, this defensive line, I mean, run stuffers, pass rushers, they're really, really good. Great linebacking crew, great secondary. Obviously, the strength of their team, and by every metric, this Texas team is in the top 5 defensively, right along with Ohio State, slightly behind them, but they're right there. And when we look at the Buckeye offense going up against these guys, I think it's going to be maybe their stiffest test of the season. What is your take on the ceiling for what Ohio State's offense can do against these guys?
Oh, that is a scary question. I would say that the range of outcomes for the offense is definitely wider than the past 2 games. But ceiling, what can they do? I mean, I feel like just because Texas has been inconsistent on offense, and they have a habit of leaving their defense on the field forever in the second half, if that happens and Ohio State's able to click and expose some things through the air, well, they could probably find a path to score, upper 30s or lower 40s, probably. But I think that's definitely the ceiling there, and I don't think that's the most likely outcome. I mean, you already talked about their defensive line. They have 8, 9, 10 playable defensive linemen. They're insanely deep. They rotate a lot. And Colin Simmons is one of the best players in the country as a true freshman, has 9 sacks. And I think their D line is close to Michigan, about Penn State caliber. And that's a really, really good unit. You already mentioned their linebackers too. And also they have the Thorpe Award winner, Jahdae Barron, who's a future NFL corner, and others in that secondary room. So that's the fascinating matchup, is Texas's defense against Ohio State's offense, for sure.
When we flip to the other side of the ball, Sam, the Texas offense against the Ohio State defense, I think that their ceiling is a lot lower. When we look at their toughest competition this year, against A&M, against Georgia twice, and these guys can't crack 20 points. I just think that if they get to 24, that's a really good effort. And honestly, I think that's where the game is won by Ohio State, that side of the ball. Quinn obviously has the talent, and that's the crazy thing. When we look at this Texas team, tons of talent. I mean, they're damn near as talented as Ohio State. When we look at, recruiting rankings and blue chips and 5 stars and 4 stars, they are incredibly talented. Tons of NFL players everywhere. But offensively, they just have not been able to get it clicking throughout the season like the Buckeyes have been able to. And I think that this is the side of the ball that determines the game. I think that the Buckeye defense, the way they're playing, is going to be able to hold them under that 24 points, which is, to me, their ceiling. And ultimately, that's what I think wins the game.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty logical opinion. I think that Texas's ceiling on offense is a lot lower. If Texas wants to win the game, what they have to do is make it dirty, and they have to muddy it up. And I don't know how much rushing offense they have to find, but probably some of it. And they've really struggled running the football this year. I mean, yeah, they're close to Ohio State in so many metrics talent-wise.
Mhm.
In fact, when you look at like projected first rounders, they may actually have more, but the difference is they're not clicking. And they've had a ton of inconsistencies, especially on the offensive side of the ball, where it just feels like figured they haven't figured out their ceiling yet, while Ohio State clearly has.
Philosophically, I want to ask you something about this playoff and about this structure. So Ohio State has had, they had 3 weeks off from Michigan to Tennessee. Then they had 10 days off from Tennessee to Oregon. They were able to rest their starters late in both games. Texas, on the other hand, down the stretch, they went from Texas A&M straight into the SEC championship game against Georgia. They lose that game. 2 weeks later, they're playing Clemson. 10 days later, Arizona State, now Ohio State. So they played one more game, much less rest in between. This is a pretty drastic difference. And that is the track for the loser of the conference championship games. They also have the 17-game route to the national championship when everybody else has 16. It's a really big punishment and a disadvantage for the loser of those games. And it is why, in my opinion, you cannot also then drop them below an idle team should they lose. And the reason I'm bringing this up, Penn State, they head into the conference championship game. They're ahead of Ohio State in the rankings. They are 11-1, Ohio State 10-2, but Ohio State with the head-to-head win. And you can debate at that point whether or not you think Ohio State should be ahead of them or not. Besides the point, Penn State went into the game rated ahead of Ohio State. Now, Penn State loses a close game where they perform pretty damn well. I think we can all agree on that. And now when we look at them coming out of the game, Penn State has 2 losses, as does Ohio State. They do have one more P5 win, but Ohio State has the head-to-head. Ohio State, I think everybody would agree, has the better resume at that point. And if we were just grading them right there, Ohio State would get the nod. However, Penn State earned the right to go play that extra game. And that's why, in including how much of a tougher road it is when you already lose, I don't think you can drop that team below a team that is idle. Where do you weigh out on that? I think it's a really big point of contention that we're going to continue to see as we move forward with the playoff.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I believe that if you're Texas or Penn State, what you're saying is, well, thankfully, even with Texas playing the close game, like thankfully we're deep rosters and we haven't faced a team of Ohio State's caliber beforehand because, yeah, or for Penn State, Notre Dame, like the 2 teams they played originally were a little bit easier. But I agree with that. And I think that, it's hard to punish conference championship game participants. And with the Ohio State Penn State head-to-head thing, my thought process was just intuitively, yeah, Ohio State has the head-to-head and they've played the tougher strength of schedule, but Penn State probably beats Michigan if Michigan plays them in Happy Valley. And I think that losses matter, same with wins, but more importantly to what you were saying, Penn State, they earned the right to be in that extra game. So did Oregon. Same with Texas versus Georgia. Texas was kind of in the position that Oregon was, where they were first in regular season standings. So they won the SEC regular season. Now, their track, of course, wasn't as hard as Georgia's was. Strength of schedule will tell you that. Then they lost to Georgia, and now they have an extra game to play. They have less rest time. And I don't know how, I think there's some disadvantages there. I don't know how much there is, because some people have brought up that all the teams who got a bye lost. But I think a huge part of that's the fact that the teams who got a bye and lost were just inferior to the teams that they played.
100%.
Yeah, like Arizona State and Boise State, drastically inferior. Georgia was inferior to Notre Dame, and Oregon was clearly inferior to Ohio State. So I think that it's wise to not punish a conference champion unless, let's say, for whatever reason, Ohio State and I don't know, like some crazy scenario where they both have one loss. Penn State somehow gets in due to some weird tiebreaker. And now that Penn State has 2 losses and Ohio State has 1, then Ohio State, I think, could deservingly be ranked ahead. That's just kind of my weird opinion on it.
How fickle we are as college football fans. I'm very happy the way it shook out, that Ohio State was able to get the Tennessee-Oregon route rather than that 5 seed route that Penn State got. When we look at Sark, obviously a really good coach. I think a lot of people forget that this is his, 10th season as a head coach. And, just, is it 4? Is his fourth year at Texas?
Yes, 4th year at Texas.
4th year at Texas. Took them from 5-7 to 8 wins, and now back-to-back in the Final Four. Winning those 2 playoff games this year, the season that they had this year in their first year in the SEC, I think should they lose this game to Ohio State, Texas fans are viewing this still as a smashing success and are very happy with the program that is now sitting on top of the world as a perennial contender. They're going to enter next season in the top 3 again. I think they're a very happy crew. When we look at Notre Dame, obviously that win against Georgia automatically makes this a hugely successful season. They've been waiting for a win like that forever. They finally got it. Penn State, this is James Franklin's best year, now having won 2 playoff games, earning their way into the Final Four for the first time. I think that everybody is kind of going for broke. They got nothing to lose except for Ohio State. I still think all the pressure is on the Buckeyes. And as I was talking to Chris the other day, if the Buckeyes lose this game as the favorite, now it's going to feel a lot better this offseason because of those 2 big wins against Tennessee and against Oregon. No doubt about it. The tenor is much different than had you lost to Tennessee. No doubt, right? But at the same time, you still were 1-1 against Oregon, 1-1 against the SEC, 0-1 against Michigan, 0-3 for the season goals, 0-12 for the seniors goals. Ultimately, no, it's not gonna have the same feeling around Ohio State as it is for the rest of these 3 programs in this thing. I think that puts Ohio State at a little bit of a disadvantage, but as we look at the team, the makeup of this team, I just feel so much mental strength. I feel so much different energy from these guys. I just got a whole lot of confidence that they're going to go into this game. None of this other noise is going to matter, and they're going to handle their business. It just feels like a unit, a team of destiny. It's the season of dreams, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, they're at minus odds to win it all. So I think
crazy.
that should provide some confidence, if any. I do agree with you that, yeah, the pressure is all on them. Now, from my personal opinion, Texas and Notre Dame should be happy about their year, especially Notre Dame, because they have not had 2 wins like that in the postseason forever. I feel like Penn State, with the draw they got, I feel like for their season to be a success, I think they have to at least win the Orange Bowl. Whatever happens in the title happens. But SMU and Boise they're not Ohio State, they're not Oregon caliber, and I feel like it would be very impactful for them to beat a team analytically of that caliber, so that James Franklin earns like a true top 10, top 5 power rated win and can play for a title. But yeah, for Ohio State, I think that beating Tennessee and beating Oregon helps. It provides optimism. But if they do somehow lose to Texas in the Cotton Bowl, from my point of view, I'm looking at Ohio State again with a more positive angle, but the season's still overall a failure. It'd be different if they beat Oregon, like if they were 2-0 against them, or at least if they beat Michigan, and then maybe the conversation's different.
Right.
But the regular season happenings make it so that I think at minimum you have to play in the title game. And more likely than not, at minimum, you have to win the whole thing for the year to not be more of a failure than a success. But yeah, I think the team has done a good job, just from what I've seen. I'm not an insider, obviously, of staying humble and doing their best to ignore the outside noise. I know that, as I told someone, it feels like everyone and their, dead dog buried is picking Ohio State to win this game. And that is a concern, because Vegas doesn't lose to the public, but that's not a guarantee, of course, that Texas is going to win here, because Ohio State is the better team and they're favored by 6 points. So they can win and Vegas can still win. I mean, the spread's huge. Ohio State's figured themselves out. I think Texas is still figuring themselves out. It's just going to be a good game that I'm very excited for. A lot of different storylines to follow.
Anybody who follows my show, I'm big on picking spots. And if I don't gamble on the Buckeyes, but boy, this is 100% a spot where I'm going Texas. If I'm betting this game, the entire public is on Ohio State. The line's not getting bigger. That means all the big money, all the sharps are coming in on Texas. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. And I really hate the way people are talking about it. Like it's just almost like a foregone conclusion that this game's almost, it just got to be played. It's a formality. When you've got a team like Texas, and this is a talent equated matchup, anything can happen. Anything can happen. So that does make me a little nervous, a little on edge. But ultimately, I do got the Buckeyes winning this one 31-24. Do you have a score prediction for this one? Are you ready to give that out?
Yes. I'm going to watch some film, release a deep dive tomorrow that may have a different one. But right now I'm sitting at 24-17 Ohio State. I think the offense, mainly because of Texas's defense, will probably come down to earth a little bit. But Ohio State's defense matched up against Texas's offense, that's a huge hurdle that Texas has to overcome, either with an even better defensive performance or something on offense that we just haven't seen yet, which wouldn't be shocked if Sark came out and did something like that. But I agree with you that Ohio State, I don't think they're going to blow out Texas here, but I think they'll win. They're the better team. Ohio State's on a roll. I will say, though, just on the contrary, to offer it up, that I feel like Texas is more similar in build defensively in terms of talent with a Penn State or with a Michigan, and D-line wise Nebraska. So I feel like in comparison to Oregon, who was smaller at DB, who had more of a pass rush D-line, I think that Texas has the build to have success against this offense, but that doesn't guarantee a win against. Just that's the opposite angle that I'm trying to give, again, because it's a foregone conclusion, and I don't want to act like it is. I think Ohio State's going to win, but this is not a foregone conclusion. It's not. I mean, Texas is too talented, and I think built enough of the right way to where this is a game that has to be played, and Ohio State has to give a good effort here.
I think one of the big things we don't know, we've not seen it yet with this newfound aggression in the passing game. If Will Howard comes out and he's a little off, what do they do? Do they shut things down? Do they pull back within themselves? Do we start getting more of an offense that we saw against Penn State? What does it look like then? An early turnover, a bad one, that maybe shakes the offensive play calling's confidence. We've not seen any adversity in the last 2 weeks or the last 2 games, so we don't know how they're going to react to that. And that'll be really interesting. But The other game, buddy, Notre Dame, Penn State. When I look at this, the Notre Dame offense versus the Penn State defense, Jeremiah Love, a little banged up. They're going to be relying a lot on Riley Leonard running the ball. He's not a great thrower of the football. Abdul Carter is such a stud. DDS, I mean, I feel like this is a bit of a mismatch on this side of the ball, and there is no explosion from the Notre Dame offense. I just don't feel like this Notre Dame offense is going to have much success against Penn State. How do you feel about that?
What I think's going to be fascinating is how is the outside leverage here. Notre Dame's off-tackle rushing offense versus Penn State's second-level tackling. I think that is the key to that side of the ball. Because we saw it against Ohio State, for example, where what Ohio State would do is they would line up Judkins or Henderson with Howard, and they would be running a speed option to the side of the field where Ohio State had no receivers, and therefore, because Penn State's running man coverage, no Penn State defender was over there. It was just an easy first down. I feel like
great.
Mike Denbrock, he's one of the best OCs in the country. So I think that he will test Penn State in that way early. Because if you can get to the second level against Penn State, you can find success. I mean, I think their D-line's the best in the nation outside of maybe Michigan's in terms of getting that interior penetration, really dominating an offensive line. But their linebackers and safeties in the regular season have had issues tackling. And we even saw it a little bit against SMU. So I don't think we can count that out. But I'm in agreement with you that if Abdul Carter is healthy, I don't see much explosiveness because they'll just move him all around the field. With him healthy, Ginty wasn't getting past the line of scrimmage. And I mean, he's a tackle buster. So I'm in agreement with you that this is a matchup that I would say favors Penn State, the offense of Notre Dame versus the defense of Penn State, especially because Penn State's passing defense has had issues, but who from Notre Dame is going to be able to consistently target them there? I don't think anyone.
That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at as well. I have a soft spot for Drew Aller, so I think my opinion of him is maybe a little overinflated for most people. He's from right over there. Watched him play in high school, like just a hometown kid, you know. I wanted him to be a Buckeye, but he's not. He's over there at Penn State. I always root for him. How do you feel the Penn State offense, which obviously has much more opportunity for explosion with Tyler Warren, with that backfield, than the Notre Dame squad does, in my opinion? How do you feel like they're going to do against this Notre Dame defense, which is also really, really good?
I feel like Penn State will have issues passing to anyone outside of Singleton and Warren. I think that like Xavier Watts will take away whatever side of the field he's on, and then Benjamin Morrison for them is hurt. But like Christian Gray, for example, Adon Schuler, and any of their other DBs against Penn State's wide receivers is kind of that's going to be locked down right there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that Tyler Warren is a non-negotiable. I feel like he'll find a way to get some receiving yards. I think that Singleton out of the backfield is a mismatch against anyone. It's similar to Henderson. You have the speed and the hands to be a mismatch against any linebacker that's going to be on you in the passing game. All Aller has to do, I feel like, is just play an okay game with minimal turnovers. He's not been good against top 25 teams this year. When you factor out Boise State, when you look at Power 4 top 25 teams, he hasn't had a passer rating of like over a 120. That's like below average. But they haven't needed him to play well. I don't even think they needed him to play at an elite level like in that OSU game to make it more competitive. They just needed to not turn over the football and produce in the red zone. And I think that if he just, doesn't throw a pick six or doesn't throw a pick and is just overall accurate, and I think maybe feels out blitzes more and handles them better than he did against Boise, I think they'll find a way to get offense, especially with that rushing attack. I think they'll run on this Notre Dame defense, especially with Riley Mills out. I think they'll pop in the second half there.
Do you have a rooting interest in this game? Are you pulling for somebody?
I have to confess that in terms of national, like for just not even winning this game, but winning it all, I kind of want to see Penn State win it all because I think it'd be the most chaotic scenario possible. It just James Franklin, who hasn't won a thing since 2016, just comes out of nowhere and wins. It's like, well, what have you been doing this whole time? Like, why win it now after Ohio State embarrassed you at home and Oregon just kind of was on top of you for the whole game? That's who I'm rooting for. I am pulling for Penn State. I will say that.
I'm kind of like you when my team's not involved. I root for the story, and that's usually like the coolest, wildest story that could happen. I generally feel the same way. I'm pulling for Penn State in this one, but I think that the best matchup, and I'd like to hear yours, the most exciting matchup that we could possibly have just as college football fans is Ohio State, Notre Dame. I mean, it doesn't get any cooler than that in a national championship game to me.
I think that in terms of like just I don't know, like the I guess the eye candy side of football is the best way I could put it. Like that would be the best, yeah. But I think the most entertaining matchup would be Penn State versus Ohio State or Texas. I feel like Riley Leonard in that offense against Pete Kwiatkowski's or Jim Knowles' defense it'd be unwatchable. It would look like Iowa playing a really good team. In my opinion, no disrespect to Notre Dame, I think Freeman's a top 10 coach. If he can find a way to win with those limitations, if anyone can, I think he would be a guy to do that. But
Sam, who is your pick in this game?
Who is my pick in the Orange Bowl?
Yeah, are you picking Penn State?
Yeah, I'm picking Penn State. It goes against part of my better judgment because I think Freeman has a coaching edge over Franklin, but I think that Penn State's roster has a lot more untapped juice than Notre Dame, and Penn State doesn't turn over the football a lot either, which Notre Dame thrives off of that. So I think those two things give Penn State the victory.
I'm also picking Penn State. My question is, we remember the transfer portal last year. Riley Leonard entered with essentially the non-contact tag on him. Like we all knew he was going to Notre Dame right off the rip. Why do you think they settled so early for Riley Leonard, a guy with such clear limitations? I mean, I think a lot of people thought this dude was coming in here and he was going to be really good based on that, and had only watched him play those couple of games we saw nationally televised from Duke last year, where he looked really good against Notre Dame. But they brought him in, and it was like, okay, he's off the board. Riley Leonard's going to Notre Dame. This guy is very limited. I was watching him in the coach's film room. I mean, he is just not so hot, man. He really isn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't make much sense to me.
It makes some sense to me because I think their receiver room is pretty like meh. Like they have talent there. Like they have Faison, who's very athletic and elusive, but if you were to line up Michigan's wide receiver room and let's say like Oregon's and compare Notre Dame to either of those, they're closer on the Michigan scale of wide receiver rooms, I think, compared to like an Oregon. I think they actually have like bad limitations at wide receiver. I mean, I think Bo Collins at one point, I think before the Indiana game, was their leading receiver. He didn't even have like 500 receiving yards. Like it's Leonard, yes, but I think it's also their receivers too. And Leonard's a really good runner, and that complements with their backs and their O-line. Like there's a reason they're averaging 6 yards per pop nationally.
I asked my buddy JR this question. I'm going to ask you the same question. You get the Oklahoma AD job tomorrow, and you are hiring a new coach to bring OU back, compete in the SEC. And you've got an opportunity to hire any one of these four coaches. Who you calling and in what order with these four coaches remaining? Somebody join in the Kirby Dabo club. I think that's really fascinating. But who you calling first to fourth out of these guys?
I would call Ryan Day first. I'd call Marcus Freeman second.
Marcus over Sark.
Yes. Yeah. Because I think Freeman's younger, and I think that in a few years he might be like more than top 10. Just the fact he beat Kirby is enough to like, hey, like come on, get over here, especially with how good of a recruiter he is at a place like Notre Dame. Third would be Sark. Fourth would have to be Franklin. I mean, the SEC is just, I think even though it was overvalued this year and the top Big Ten teams were better than the top SEC teams this year, just like last year, by the way. I think 2023 Ohio State would beat 2023 Georgia or Bama, and not easily, but I think it's clear they would win. The fact that Franklin struggles in these big games is just something that I can't have, especially with what is likely going to be a rebuild. I mean, he's good at rebuilds, but if I'm Oklahoma, I want to win, and I want to win big sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I think that those three are better than Franklin at that as of now.
I dig it. I think I would go, I would flip-flop Sark and Freeman, but that might change depending on this next game. The dude has certainly impressed me to an incredible degree. I mean, absolutely. I think he is just, I was just saying this the other day with Chris. I mean, he's a leader of men. He always says the right thing. He's humble but confident. He's good looking. He's charismatic. Like, he's got it all. Smart as a whip. He's just got it all. And it's dangerous. It really is what he could do over there. It's dangerous. So, buddy, I got one more question. Somebody is joining the Kirby Dabo Club. Still amazing to me that we only have 2 active national championship winning coaches. Who do you got? Who's joining the club?
It's it has to be Ohio State right now. It has to be, but like, I don't like picking games in advance, and I am scared. I am scared that it will be someone that I don't like, that it could be Freeman, or that it could be Franklin, or it could be Sark. I mean, I'm going with Day right now. I think it's the obvious choice. I think he has the best team. I think he's the best coach. But like you mentioned, like from the betting angle, I'm terrified because the power ratings and the book see something that no one else does. And that is yikes. I just don't know. But I would lean Ohio State and Ryan Day right now if I could.
Season of dreams, buddy. Sam, thanks so much for joining us. Everybody, you can check out our buddy Sam at College Football with Sam. He's excellent, particularly the Big Ten, the best in the business, soon to be the whole country. Check him out. Appreciate you so much, Sam. Thanks, buddy. And that's my guy, Sam. Remember, tomorrow is Thursday, the big game, Notre Dame, Penn State. I've got Penn State winning. I'm also rooting for Penn State, but I'll be happy if Notre Dame wins, because Notre Dame, Ohio State, I think is just a ridiculous matchup for a national championship. It's a matchup for a national championship that we should have seen in 2012, but we did not get to because we did not have a self-imposed bowl ban the year prior. Whatever, water under the bridge. We just might get it this year. During that game, we're going to go live here. First time I've done that. We're going to have the chat open so we can go live, watch the game together. I'll, call the game, whatnot. And we'll just talk about the game, because the winner of that game, hopefully, will be our opponent, and we won't find that out whether or not we advance till the following day. But I got no skin in the game. Most likely you don't either. So we're going to watch that game, check those guys out, and talk here in the chat. So do pop in and check me out. And I appreciate you guys so much. That'll do it for today. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Juckonbucks out. Hey, it's Juck.
Juck? Who is Juck?
Juckonbucks.
Juckonbucks. Juckonbucks? Juck. Juckonbucks.
My guy Juck.
Juckonbucks.
My buddy Juck.
Juck is the Juck.
Juckonbucks.
Okay. Juck is junk.
The Juckeyes.
Juckeyes.
Juckonbucks.
Junk. Juck. Not junk.